been trying to press the record button like 5 or 6 times. Excuse the fireworks if you hear them. The explosions, the freedom explosions. There are 2 main aspects to this disclosure. One is, and it goes according to the scale of the 3-phase unveiling. From the advanced technology, or more so the corruption and celebrity cloning, the easiest to observe and understand aspects of experimentation and deception, manipulation of the human race. You know, the corruption, everyone can understand legal corruption and so on and so forth, but it actually goes into spiritual corruption where it's beyond just like a no-no and, you know, something like that, or legal, you know, discrepancy or something. It's basically the destruction of innocence. And but the first phase being that leads into the advanced technology, the mind control scalar, and I always go through this, but different forms of technology, modification, electroglytic, spatial temporal distortions, control, time dilation, mind control AI, things like that, virtual realities, and then down into cosmic intelligences and timeline, basically infiltration, and how there have been almost irreversible influences to the society genetically, even mentally, emotionally, energetically, and physically in terms of what has happened to the space of literally, you know, where we exist, at least according to or as far as our bodies go. But the point is that in every aspect of that, and as well primarily the later, more so cosmic intelligence, what it means to us all, and the nature of the reality of the soul, and as well in the phase 3 in cosmic intelligence, all these, you know, deeper realizations, as well as how things have been manipulated on a deeper scale, is the reality of the soul, the origins of the human race, and the origins of the universe. If you look around, you don't see what people are doing happening everywhere. I mean, technically you do, but people are the ones doing it. And so whatever enables people to do that is something separate from everything else, at least to the degree that people don't fit in and match the other species. Point is, that's obvious that there is some form of manipulation, acceleration, or downright modification or active creation that is related to the origins of humanity. So there's a lot from the first part to a little bit of cloning. It's basically all about the soul. If the important parts to understand is about how the soul and the spirit and the mind body work. And there's information regarding that in the cloning and the corruption and how that's to replace and manipulate the soul and reprogram people and things like that, all the way down to how the technology can be used to interact on the soul level. You can see it, manipulate it, it plays into the replacing. And that, you know, in using technology to look at the blood, the DNA, you're basically modifying it, or observing at least, what is beginning to touch with the bridge between the energetic, spiritual, or just simply consciousness, the mind, or is the differing in definitions, and the physical form, the body. That's like where the bridge begins to, where you would look at, observe, or modify things in order to change that. But it's still relative, along with the fact that we're looking at the corruption area in that. And then later on, with the third phase, as far as cosmic intelligence, the origins, the nature of consciousness, time and space, like what reality actually is, you know, that might be one of the most basically fulfilling in an intellectual and more so spiritual awareness, knowledge sense. The point is, there's knowledge throughout all of it. And there's, in that sense, 2 types of disclosure, at least as far as I'm concerned, which is that there are events that have taken place that are a threat to everyone that exists, everyone that has a sentience. If you don't have a sentience, well, we'll get to that later, I guess. But the point is, if you do have a sentience, then the threat, what is threatening to that, you know, a person who, in their mind, and their ability to be conscious, is a different type of threat if somebody's going to like punch you in the face. And now, of course, because the two are merged, you get punched in the face enough, well, you're no longer sentient. You know, that's how it works. The body is kind of like a gateway to existence for spirit in a physical plane. But the point is that what is happening is not just like an outbreak of crime or so on and so forth. It's literally an attempt, an attack, a plan to remove the sentience of people and turn people into someone else's creation. So the point is that there's that, and then there's the knowledge aspect, which, you know, both are important to a degree. But basically it's all simultaneous, that with the expansion of the realization of how corruption really, you know, has spread, or not spread, but how it exists, how it begun, you know, and then from there just continued. And I mean, if you look out, it's like, oh, it's great, but if you knew what was going on to get us here, one, there's stuff going on, and two, if that wasn't going on, you know, you could do things that you can't even imagine. And you don't even need technology to do that. You could have, if everyone was at a certain frequency in an area, there can be genetic effects. And I don't mean like modifications, but healings, like mass healings, okay, that can happen, and remembrances of basically being able to activate our consciousness in a way that is more beneficial. And I don't mean really, you know, there's a fine line between manipulating through strange effects and, you know, but the line is determined by fear. And it doesn't mean that you can just break the line if you have no fear, but it's that it's hard to describe. Some people are going to look at certain things and say this is, you know, blasphemy. Basically, has nothing to do with anything, but that's actually, it's just their interpretation. And in other situations, for the most part, where they're looking at things and saying we shouldn't be messing with that, they're correct. But the point is, the person who is just afraid and not actually understanding, they're going to draw that line everywhere, and it's not going to be accurate. You know, half the time maybe, or most of the time. There's a saying, well, I'm going to mess it up. It's twice a day a broken clock is right, or once a day. Actually, twice a day, actually. But if it's, never mind, not a 24-hour clock. But the point is, and so I kind of am looking at this as far as how I'm going to go from here. You know, this is part of an awakening. This is what humanity is supposed to go through. It's just going to continue. There's more people bringing disclosure, I mean, but as well, the corruption is going to continue as well. So I want to draw an outline for what's going on with that, as well as assist in, you know, from what I can say in bringing knowledge, or helping people find the knowledge themselves of the reality of the soul, of how to liberate oneself, and just make sense of things. It's complicated but simple, but it's complicated in the sense that when we look out, we don't see reality as we used to see it, or as it was. Excuse me. Never have hiccups or anything until you begin to speak for a few minutes. That's part of the paradox of reality, and then where you get something like that. We didn't. Sorry. We look out. We're not really seeing what we're supposed to be seeing. There are methods of controlling the mind, and we're literally in a kind of diminished or deficient sensory or perceptual reality system. Otherwise, we would look at our lives, we would see if there is an issue, if energy wanted to be released, something we wanted to do, something we wanted to create and express ourselves through, and we would fix it by attaining that, by achieving that, by looking into that. The responses that we normally run into are programmed in through mass mind control, basically. It's a form of helplessness, it's learned helplessness, and it's a form of fear-based, trauma-based mind control. This takes place on the visceral, physical level, and as well through basically psychotronic means, through dreams, and levels you wouldn't believe, but I'm going to try and help you with that. But that's like part of where the corruption, okay, the power of the technology, the advancement, all of that, and then the corruption, where those two are beyond what you could imagine. For instance, there's the ability to basically have a person in an area, they're not moving, say somebody's asleep in class. A system can beam the individual and pull out of all the frequencies of the room their specific individual frequency, which is particular to them. It can then basically begin a type of communication with that person's consciousness, which enables a kind of virtual reality system to be enabled with their consciousness being within the virtual reality. Basically, it can create a dream world, and it can put the person into the dream world. If they're asleep, they don't need to be put asleep, they don't need to be changed in any way, it's already happening. Your energy is basically being pulsated around you. That's kind of like a digital signature for, it's actually not digital, but you can imagine that, like your MAC address or something. And your particular, the information of your internal experience is going to be accessible through that. So they figured out, and these are just scientists that have figured out because they've been paid to, and as well, they weren't, somebody else would have done it, is how it works. Because that's the other part, that it's a big ball of something now, and there's so many people, so many different groups that somebody would take it upon themselves to try and figure out how to do the most depraved of experiments, and so it's happening basically regardless of who's doing it. Say you shut down the ones that are going on right now, next week some guy's going to get a bright idea to do it. It's kind of how it works, and it's being held down in the best it can. But with this situation, scenario, somebody who's dreaming, they can pull that information, feed it through basically a simulator, and feed it back to them. And in the meantime of it being in the simulator coming back, somebody else can code in an avatar, a being, okay, a stick figure that's going to go up and give him a knock-knock joke. Okay, well, if that whole simulator is also being fed through somebody else's, basically through brain-to-machine technology, let's look up the God Helmet. They figured this out years and years ago. I thought about this as a kid, and so I'm pretty sure trillionaire scientists could figure this out in a few weeks, let alone the decades that it took them to perfect this stuff. Multi-generation scientists. And that's how it all works. Everyone is multi-generation in what they do. But yeah, magnets around the head, okay, electromagnets, crystals, crowns, make the connections. They figured out how to basically open up the mind to make dream worlds, because that's what this reality is based upon. That's what it is, the fundamental, or the rudimentary or foundation for what we are, the neurons and the atoms and materials and electrons, is to create some form of virtual experience. And so whenever you isolate the mind and use that within a system, you feed the energy into a system, a computer, that creates another one. Basically, they're like plug and play. The mind and virtual reality are plug and play units. And so then you have somebody else connected to that one, and you're feeding both the people through a dream simulator, basically. Well, now you can have somebody go into somebody else's dreams. Point is, they did this to kids, and basically would just like torture them over and over again. And rape them, molest them, sacrifice them, whatever it was. So that's where this goes, where it comes from, that the most unbelievable technology that could change the world, could allow people to function, paralyzed individuals could function their lower body again, and there's so many things, but as well, that's where something comes into play as far as not changing the situation, because the universe basically gives us problems so we can overgrow them, so we can learn. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the basis of it. And so I wrote something down. I probably put this in the post. I was going to write a little bit more, but I would need to focus and probably partition what I'm doing into two kind of separate, and there could be possibly 2 or 3 separate forms of disclosure, extremes, if you will. But it's literally the best and the worst anyone can ever imagine. And I don't mean that in a way that it is cliche. I mean literally. If you were given, even in this sense of saying literally, it's really bad, man, and then naming some example of how bad it is. No, I mean it's designed by figuring out the maximal limitations of the human imagination and gearing it towards depravity. There's something to do with that energy, with that, the process of the way that figures things out, and that's the best way to basically form weapons or control a population. Apparently it's because that gets everything done without basically the least amount of lack of efficacy. I can't think of the words right now, but basically, if the evil for a person is simply meaning it abridges their free will. So if they try to determine how to make a dream simulator in a certain way, okay, well, if they figured out how to get somebody into their dream simulator and do the most evil and heinous of things to that person, they allowed a bunch of convicts, okay, run the thing, and they tested it on them, and then unsuspecting people, okay, well, you know it works. If you're trying to build an army, if you're trying to build virtual reality for training, if you're trying to build one for vacations, well, when you can get it just right, now this person is screaming their head off because they really feel like they're being stabbed to death, okay, well, you skip all the trials and testing to see if the pleasure works just right and if it feels right, to see if, you know, it's okay, all the other reasons are kept up once you get that one. So everything is modeled after that, from basic combat training and other scenarios before virtual reality ever came into the scene. Everything is, if the most evil version of it can work, then all the other uses are already basically wrapped up in that and it'll be completed. So it's literally the worst thing that you could imagine. That's what it's based upon. That's the truth in relation to these projects. And the point is, it's also the best. Not that, but that everyone who's not in line with that, then they are working for the protection of humanity. It's basically, what's the worst reason for doing something? And that's as well, this is the other aspect of it, which is the actual aspect. What's the worst reason for doing something? And you could say that would be the destruction and enslavement of the entire universe, or for the entirety of humanity, for your own pleasure and deviancy against the original intended purpose of creation. So it's not just who's going to be the biggest and the baddest and the worst of that family or whatever it is, or the best weapon for mind control or soldiers. It's literally a desire to destroy every last innocent, basically, essence of life. To destroy it, to corrupt everything, to corrupt every last living seed of awareness in existence. That's the only pleasure that's left for some of these beings or people, or whatever you want to, however you want to look at this. So then what's the best reason for, and motivation? That could be, you know, in all, which is the best version, or the most good, the most, you know, whatever you want to call that. And that would be for the protection and the potential, full potential of all sentient life, meaning the opposite of this, that the people who are performing this are doing it for the worst reasons you can come up with, unless you can come up with anything worse than the absolute enslavement and destruction of all sentient life. And therefore, the people who are working not against this, but for humanity, are they motivated by the best reason, which is for the protection of all sentient life and the pursuit of basically the full potential, you know, based upon our intended purpose of life, which is not to be a toy for somebody else or for something else, or a slave. It's meant to be free in that sense that really can't be defined through animals. You can't find, you know, you can't liberate an animal. You can put them in the wild where they belong. You can't, like, free their mind from, you know, the shadows of ignorance. That doesn't work. They're already as good as they're going to get. Which is how it's supposed to be. That's the point. And so, both motives are at play in what we are analyzing and researching here today. And I have personal experience, as do you all, because the human race is personally entangled in something of a spiritual battle of cosmic proportions, and everything in this reality is connected through that. And, you know, the point is that we're all involved, and it gets to the point where when the DNA is activated in a certain way, the mind begins to perceive events and memories of ancestral origin where apparently there were overt spiritual battles, and basically beings walked the earth and things basically were a lot more different. And so, you know, I have personal experience with this in terms of, you know, more direct nature, but everyone's involved and everyone can look around and see it, and everyone is limited through these consciousness limiting systems. And so this relates to the time of the fallen, the watchers, the chimera, or chimera, however you want to say it, experiments, and you know, all these stories which are believed to be mythical in nature. That is this time now. The time of the far past is now. It's flipped around. We think it's impossible, it couldn't be that way, and we think that it was thousands of years ago, but it's not. The projection of 1,000 years between then and now is the illusion. It's a fold of time. This is one of the big secrets. This is why there is so much secrecy. The ancient depictions of warnings in regards to these events is related to this, as far as the flood, warnings of a time, basically a great return of power, and as well a great judgment. All of this is related to that. And it all has to do with genetic experiments and the corruption of the human race. And advanced technology was discovered then, which advanced the civilization to where it is now. The entire in-between 2,000 years or 6,000 years, depending on how you look at it, is an illusion cast by those with access to this power, hiding the technology and waiting while using the human race as guinea pigs, not to say anything bad about guinea pigs. And so people, this is all written down, literally. There are projects where the human race is the subject of experimentation and enslavement. That's what it is. That's how people are viewed by those who carry this out. I'm not saying certain people, I'm not saying everyone is perfectly fit for knowing the absolute truth in the sense that they should be given right to do whatever they want, but it doesn't mean that every last person should be enslaved. Really, it's a weird situation. Because you believe it one way or another, either A, somebody should be enslaved, which is why it's happening now, or B, nobody should be enslaved, which is why you should enslave the people that are doing it now. So it's like, we're gonna have some type of event play out from this, regardless of what it is. But they use people for chattel. This is not magical, this is not other realms, it's not basically other beings. It's people who enslave other people, and they use advanced technology to do it, to protect themselves, to infiltrate every group, and to wipe the mind and attempt to replace the soul of the original person. And ultimately, the farther end of this, I'm telling you why it goes so deep, and I'm going to have to figure out how to organize this information. We have to connect these videos together, or find somebody who knows a better way, or whatever it is. But they're replacing people. They're taking the mind of the subject after traumatizing the person to the point where they're basically already wiped, and then they're inserting their own memories and their own consciousness, and they're replicating themselves through that. They don't replicate through sex, they replicate through stealing the soul vessel of a human. So everything is related to the unleashing of personal unconscious desires through the murder, deviant sex acts, experimentation, and hybridization of the original life. It's basically seen as a type of art to allow the lower powers to rise above and obtain basically access to this reality. They view themselves as portals for hell. They view themselves as portals for fallen beings that are believed to come from a parallel universe that humans have always written down and expressed as hell, as an underworld. And I don't necessarily mean, basically the words get mixed up from what one definition of underworld is, a parallel dimension of hell, of like, we don't really have, fully complete definitions and ways of understanding this, but you get the idea, because it is what it sounds like. And in that sense, I'm trying to drive home the idea that anything that furthers the act of deception and depravity and disconnect from the original intention is viewed as a kind of, I don't know how to, but like something good. Like basically they have weekly contests of who can be the most depraved individual. And eventually at the end of the month, somebody gets a trophy. All right, I don't know what better way to say it, but it's viewed as like a sport to be more evil and depraved than the last person. Through that, the world is ruled under a net of this type of degradation, spiritual. The plan is an overall plan of spiritual degradation and enslavement to rule humanity. Those are the people that you see running the show. It's what it is. And it's all a science, and it's an art to them, and the world itself is an art. And you can look at basically all the maps of life, and all they do is take the head or the height of the individual and they put it where the bottom is, and they flip the two. It's inverted. And so you have the sex organs at the top and the heart and the mind at the bottom, to the point where the lower carnal desires must run the show. They must be the most high, if you will. That's the game. That's the name of the game. That's it's like it's a process. It's an experimentation, but it's a process of unveiling or unleashing a carnal desire that is more powerful than the mind, and the mind basically naturally gets out. It dips out, and it's like an inverted essence that rises to the top. And when this is maximized, and the person can do anything, and they won't even shed a tear, they won't even feel a flutter in their heart, okay, then it's understood that another essence has inhabited their body. But the point is, with that, we can't imagine how bad it is to the point where it's like a spider's web. They have networks of how to mentally molest people spiritually in every area, in every method, to the point where items that you buy at the store, all of the logos are they're a form of black magic. And they all usually mean dead human when you decipher them in a certain way. And all the items are apparently, this is what I was told from a basically military faction, that they're all cursed. That a black magician curses all the mainstream items, whether it's music or, I don't want to say any names, so it's not because I don't want to let people know or care like somebody's going to point a finger at me. I don't give a damn. It's just, to distract away from it. But all of them, all the main corporations basically are like that. And whether it's just, like bed sheets or something. Okay, apparently everything has to have some form of insignia or symbolism in the production or the representation that denotes it as property of the underworld. And everything is mapped out towards that. And the human souls are owned in this way. Because apparently if there's enough of those types of items in a person's residence, then that place is accessible by an unclean spirit. That they have to follow the laws of some type of original creative force that is inherently protective of human life, and possibly just sentience all over. And once a person violates enough of those laws, that's where the spiritual forces can target that individual. That's why it's so much deeper than, targeting or getting people to sign off and like, here you go, and now we're all, slaves of the state. It's not, there's no such thing. It's an underworld entity, and it's spiritual forces at play to the point where we're protected when we're born. The more hoops we jump through, the more we're actually removing the natural protection. So it's kind of difficult to talk about and cover any one aspect of it, because it immediately leads into multiple others that are simultaneously required to comprehend what is at least being viewed at in that portion, and it's almost like it has to be spoken about, because all aspects of it are the most corrupt thing you could imagine. It's beyond what we think about. That's also part of it. We're like sitting ducks if we don't understand that it's something like that this is what's going on. It's really easy, and if you think about it, to believe that people go bomb other countries and blow them up, and you know how that must be. If a deafening noise ripped open this building and fragmented part of my body and sent me flying, okay, that's horrific. Especially if I didn't die and it's like the rest of, my family or somebody. And so knowing that goes on just because people, shot off fireworks and they feel happy about it, it's not too far from seeing that and going, well, this might be some type of entity waging spiritual war against our entire species, because there's destruction everywhere, non-stop, without rest. I can't think of the word. So it's like, it's the same thing, saying there's a spiritual war over the innocence of humanity, or saying people actually write that down, and it's not just like, oops, we didn't mean to go to war for thousands of years and bomb this country or do that just because we were gung-ho. It's like, no, the people at the top know what they're doing. They're trying to destroy something, either the ignorant or the weak or the innocent. It's one of those, or both, and possibly all. Just the least, enjoyable, I guess. So In actuality, the head is on top, where one's mindfulness and center of their being and physical power, as well as their emotional stability, are the primary composites of their self in this reality. Your mind and your heart are related to the power you derive and the awareness you have. Your sexual organs are not on your forehead. They're not the guiding aspect of your existence. If somebody is guided and motivated for carnal desires, then it's like being headless. It's like spiritually decapitating the individual. Everything is a metaphor. The hints are everywhere. It's basically how it all works. This is the spiritual decapitation of someone. Basically, anybody who goes into this without knowing and remembering and striving for the truth will become spiritually decapitated, and it's to break off, it's to stop them from being able to return to some kind of original state of purity. For the weird part, they also say that we're in a kind of distortion template or temporal field, and that once this is all over, the survivors go back to the beginning as if it never happened in the first place. And it's apparently the beginning and the far end, whatever you want to look, is what people call heaven. And there's also tricks. Every step of the way there are tricks. There are just games that they play with people. As well, they say the earth is not what people think it is, and that there's more land, at the very least. And if you've thought about anything, you know how consciousness, space, and time is not what we think it is. But in the falsified version, sexual organs are on top, and thus the heart and the mind come secondary to carnal desires, including rage and lust. These are the primary motivating factors of the group that plagues humanity, and is a learning process to unveil not the truth, but the carnal desires and acts of continuing complexity and depravity. This is where it gets weird, because the belief is that for some people, the truth to be unveiled is that they are carnal, desire-based beings that want nothing more, and that we have a split race of humans and humanoids, and that they walk amongst us, basically, and that there are some that have no connection to the source, aka no soul. They're basically created humanoids. And that these beings want nothing more than a bloodlust, or to satiate their bloodlust. So in that sense, they don't have a higher truth, but I don't really believe that. Maybe I'm wrong for not believing it, you know. Not really sure at this point, but this is what's happening. Those are some of the notions behind it. So that's literally the name of the game. If it's considered evil or goes against innocence, then that is sought after and refined to produce the most powerful evil. The more one is paid, the more the more evil, then the more one is paid, the more allowance, the higher the position they rise to, and the more access to innocent beings. And the way this society is set up, if they're in a high position, they're there because they gave access of innocent beings to someone in these groups, or they're the one molesting, whether it's the masses or fans or whatever it is. And it's all a type of dark mental, it's just dark magic, it's just psychology with a twist to silently torture the person in ways that turn their own mind against themselves. And you can see it happening everywhere. What is happening to people? They're all being roped up in these material, you know, trendy addictions, and it's like ruining their you know, sovereignty and innocence. That's what that is. So in short, this sounds kind of like fairy tale speak in regards to the more powerful evil, because we don't really think along those lines. But in short, the actual essence of evil, in the sense of the vibrations that are sensed and transmitted by sentient beings and some kind of essence in the universe itself, has been discovered and refined to create the most viable and vile form of warfare imaginable. Just remember the line I gave earlier. If you can get it done and carry out the most vile evil act with that, then that technology will also work for all the other stuff. If you have to, you know, get something that can disable a person and shut them off entirely, alright, well, you can use that technology to make them jump through hoops as well. It's the same concept. But as well, it's because there's basically a pleasure from it. It's not just because it's the most powerful. It's because it's for some other darker region or reason that it feeds them a certain way. Or it feeds some other entity, an enemy of innocence. Which is, in my opinion, basically created beings that are fine-tuned and geared towards depravity and desolation. This is what is spoken about in all the ancient texts. This is why there were and are coming great times of change in response to this. The last parts I want to mention here is that it's all beyond, think about what went on, or what I told you about. Okay, now what would it become in a few years? Imagine you were there and you took it to the next level. Okay, we'll get to here. We'll do that for 1,000 times, and the final iteration is 10 back from where they are now. It's got to, and I can explain it too. Instead of they lie, they steal stuff. They pull people and make them slaves. They've created actual worlds. They figured out how to create realities and create worlds and enslave colonized areas of humanity. And apparently there's more land. And as well, it happens a lot in these underground bases, and that they're used as a kind of like factory farm for people. And so, but the point is that they create realities. And if you look at space and time, we're basically in a series of parallels. So it's as if we're in a kind of computer system where there are multiple layers and versions of what's taking place. All it means is they figured out how to use the electrogravitic technology to transfer themselves to other parallels, and they're creating a conglomerate of human slavery across the parallels. That's why it goes farther than we can imagine. We're thousands of years in the past. And the other part of that is that they take portions of somebody's consciousness into these alternate or created artificial realities, and those portions of a person's consciousness powers that version of themselves in that reality. And basically they have to use souled beings to do their work, at least in a certain sense. It's as if they don't work in the artificial realities, the virtual realities. That if you have a computer program, it won't act as a human. Say you have a computer program, a person, okay, you put the person, the soul being, in the world of the computer program. You can have the program run around in space, or out here in a clone body, and it'll seem like a person, unless you activate it in a certain way and it just has a bloodlust. And why a computer relates to bloodlust is because all that stuff that says, no, don't do that, that's disgusting. Okay, well, a computer can't sense that. That's the whole point. And in that sense, a computer doesn't have a bloodlust. It's just, that would be the most reasonable and effective, logical path to getting what you want, versus, asking, for instance, a computer trying to take you out on a date is hitting you over the head and raping you. Because why would it want to sweet talk you and take you out and stuff like that? It has no ability to comprehend that. So, but you would think a computer is disgusting. What the hell's wrong with it? It's not. It has no essence of what makes a person a person. So they created beings like this. And as well, there are worlds populated. And I'm not really trying to throw them all under the bus, but because the truth is they're not all like that. It's just that the point is they want to make them like that and to degrade everything. But so it's also for people who are pure and resisted that, because those are, it's not all that way. But for instance, a smarter computer would realize that the things that it would have to act human-like in order to obtain are not reasonable for a computer to desire. Therefore, it wouldn't desire that and would sit there and do math homework. Not literally math homework, but it would try and figure out problems for that way, which is what the good computers did. And but they're basically, it's a weird war. I'm already getting weirder as I'm going, but the point is, a person in these realities, and a person who is made in the computer simulation and never really doesn't have a soul, the human has more power than that being. So they take snippets of a person's consciousness and pull it into these realities, and they use the human as a creative force. And it's what is happening here in this reality. If you imagine, people are being enslaved, and the creativity, the backbone of humanity, is being used to guide, to manifest their own enslavement. It's the same exact thing happening out here. Because the two worlds of an inverted, internal, spiritual, mental, hyperspace, cyberspace, artificial dimension, whatever you want to call it, virtual reality, it's the inversion of what's happening out here and what's happening in our minds. They're all at an interplay. It's the basic, the fundamental bubbles of reality that you get if you get realities. I just wanted to make that because I'm straying as I go into more, looking at exploring different aspects of knowledge, cleansing. And I'm really not too far into that, but not cleansing, but exploring the knowledge aspect, although I'm made of plenty of videos with that. But the original releases And the whole original show is based upon the disclosure of these underground bases, the cloning, the advanced technology, the corruption, and basically creating artificial alternate dimensions and hijacking them for the enslavement of humanity and the corruption of innocence. And so, because that's the basis of it, and we're apparently coming up on something here that something big is gonna happen that's gonna decide it. There's technology that if we don't reach a new state of awareness, basically within a few months here, then we're going to have to, we're not gonna enjoy the results. So, you never want to start with the negative, but the point is that if we're looking at it right, then what happens here in the next few months will be a push to awaken for millions of people, and that's what we have to focus on, because as well, what you see, remember, it's kind of like that computer system, because what you see, you will create and you will become. Okay, so everything is energy and everything is responding in this way. That's how this reality has been manipulated and been tainted and been controlled without people knowing. I mean, they know, but they're also told to not know, or that it's normal, so it's like, oh, whatever. If you put cleverly the subliminals, the subtle influences of what you want to see that don't even have to be directly in view, they can be in the peripheral, it will eventually take over the view. Okay, that's the perspective will flip, and that will become the foreground. And so there's so much more to go on about how the conscious mind, as a kind of pinpoint, like the end of a cone of awareness, and how the subconscious and the two can invert to the point where your short-term memory and long-term memory can invert in your conscious and your subconscious, and you can gain access to thousands of years of memory and information. There's so much more. It's all geometric frequencies, mathematics, intuition in that sense of simply knowing. It's all awareness and knowledge and how to. I'm not going to drag on or get more metaphysical, although that is where some of this will go, because that's the true science. The myth, the metaphysics, the fluffy-duffy stuff, without the coding of BS, that's actually science. And all this other stuff we have is an illusion. It doesn't really matter. They figured out how to do it all and replicate it all in 2 seconds, and what matters is one's ability to comprehend how reality is fluid. It's primarily fluid. It's based upon your mind. It's as if your mind is the maker of reality, not dust and chemicals and so on and so forth. But there is one true creator, one true creative force. It's watching everything, if you will. And then there are intermediaries that are basically messing everything up. It's the age-old story of the fallen. That is what we were shown and told, and what we suffered for what you could say is thousands of years, because in either that or humanity lasted a few years, a few minutes, because we saw it all. More will come out soon. That's all I can say. I'm going to start organizing things a little bit differently, and so thank you.